Welcome to everything you need to know before you embark on your ultimate Alaska adventure. We have a great panel today, and I'd first like to introduce you to NatHab's Field Operations Manager, Corbin Hawkins. Thank you all so much for being here. Corbin, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thanks, Kendall. Always a pleasure. I feel like I'm starting to do these more and more. It's almost like a bi-weekly thing for me to do these Know Before You Go webinars. So happy to get back out into the field. And today we've got the distinct pleasure of having Mr. Justin Gibson on board with us. Been working with Justin for quite some time now. Justin, you want to take us or tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get right into this thing.
Sure, yeah. I'm excited to be here with you guys. I've been a natural habitat expedition leader for a decade or maybe a little more. Everything from polar bears to China to Ethiopia, and I live in Alaska. I've been in Alaska for 20 years now, so this is kind of my baby, this trip, and I'm very excited to meet some of you and to have, talk a lot about the trip today as well.
Sweet, thanks, Justin. And Renata, we also have Renata with us today, who is our head of field staff, and Renata is going to walk us through a little bit of a lot of the COVID protocols that NatHab has in place for these trips moving forward. So Renata, you want to give us a little introduction to yourself, and then we'll get right into the COVID stuff.
Thanks, Corbin. Yeah, my name is Renata. I have been with Natural Habitat and our office team for about 8 years, and have done a lot of program ownership. I've actually designed the logistics for the Ultimate Alaska program for probably 6 years or so, but now I oversee all of our field staff, and I also head our COVID task force that has designed the protocols for running trips during COVID.
Yeah, and I understand that was quite the arduous task. You want to tell us how you got there and what the COVID protocol means to all of those who are unfamiliar?
Absolutely. So we have actually been running trips since last July. We've run trips in Yellowstone, Mexico, the Galapagos, Kenya, and Costa Rica, and we are getting ready to ramp up for the summer as well. So we've been successfully running trips. We have had, as of now, no cases or transmission of COVID within our staff or guests on trip, and a lot of that is because of these preventative measures that we're taking with our protocols. So as Corbin said, it has been an incredible amount of work. We have had essentially since pretty much exactly a year ago, when COVID was first found within the US and we went into our initial quarantine, we banded together and got a team that has been really heavily focused on creating protocols so that we could run trips again and enhance guest safety on those trips. So we have a few priorities that we have been focusing on when it comes to the development of these protocols. First and foremost, to get the skeleton of the protocols together, our team did a tremendous amount of background research, looking at recommendations from the CDC and World Health Organization. So utilizing those recommendations, we created the skeleton of our protocols. It was then incredibly important for us to ensure that we were communicating with our other business owners and industry leaders within adventure travel and the outdoor travel industry. So we have been working with other companies to share best practices for these COVID protocols. We then needed to determine a way to screen our partners that we work with on trip. So for this Ultimate Alaska program, for example, you're dining at a bunch of different restaurants, going to multiple hotels, using various transportation options. We needed to determine a way to vet those partners that we're working with to ensure that they are meeting our standards for their COVID protocols. So we have a vetting system in place there. And then we have needed to ensure that we were able to screen our guests and field staff on trip. So we have guests fill out a health questionnaire prior to departing, and then we have a symptom and temperature check that we do daily to see if anyone is having any symptoms of COVID. If that is the case, that someone is developing any types of symptoms, we do have a remote team of doctors through United Healthcare Global that we have access to at any point during our trip. So if someone was, let's say, having a high temperature or showing a symptom, we would be able to reach out to those doctors immediately, and they would be able to guide us on next steps. So then after screening, we need to make sure that all of our field staff are trained in our most up-to-date protocols so that they can implement them in the field. So prior to the start of every season, I have an in-depth training with all of the guides and field staff that are going to be involved in that trip to ensure they know the most up-to-date protocols, how it'll be implemented, and if there are any changes over the past few months, what those changes have been. And then finally, we need to make sure we're setting expectations with our partners, with our guests, with our staff. So we outline sort of the overarching components to our protocol on our website. And then we also send all of our guests and guides personal protective equipment so that you can really start participating in mitigating your risk when you leave your house. So in your PDB, you will get 2 KN95 masks, hand sanitizers, sanitizing wipes, and a little bit more information how to best mitigate that risk when you are traveling. So this is a topic that I revisit on a daily basis, and our COVID protocol team revisits on a weekly basis. And we're seeing a huge sort of shift in how our world is operating right now, because we are seeing such heavy distribution of vaccines, more testing availability. So it's very good news for the future within travel, but it does mean we require a lot of flexibility, and we need to be pretty consistently to make sure we're up to date with what's happening on a global level.
Thanks, Renata. And for those listening, I can tell you that this document is no joke. It is some 20 pages long, and the process to get this done, I know it was a crazy amount of work. So thanks for putting that all together, Renata. And thank you guys for your continued confidence in our ability to vet all of this and talk to our vendors and activity providers, and making sure we're going about this the right way so we can get back out and traveling. But Renata, if you don't mind, do you want to pare this down a little bit for us and tell us what we're doing, what are our actionable steps in the field that we're taking to make people feel more comfortable and ultimately be more safe on these trips during the pandemic?
Of course. So the approach that we are taking to looking and breaking down your trip, every component of your trip, we're looking at something that's called a combination intervention approach. And that's the idea that a combination of interventions is the best way to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. So there's 4 main components to this approach. Many, if not all, you are familiar with on a daily basis. So the first and foremost is respiratory hygiene. That means that we require our guests to wear a mask if they are inside vehicles, really, and there's a lot of modes of transportation on this trip. So inside vehicles, planes, trains, if you are outside and not able to physically distance between anyone outside of your traveling group. And that is first and foremost the main component for us. Next is hand sanitization. So again, you'll be getting hand sanitizers when you are within your PDB, but also we have hand sanitizing stations on trip, readily accessible, and more than on a regular trip, we will be prompting individuals on the trip to wash your hands. So before meals, after meals, if there's any equipment that you might be handling before and after that as well. So really encouraging hand hygiene. And then next is going to be physical distancing. So something we've all been practicing as much as possible, maintaining that physical distancing of 6 feet when traveling with someone that is not in your family group. So we have the ability to do that quite easily in the vehicles that we use, given just NatHab's small group size. And what that looks like on more of our meals would be that we first and foremost will look at doing outside meals, spread out as possible. If we can't do outside meals, if that's not an option, then inside in private spaces where we have the ability to spread out. And then after that, if that isn't possible or feasible, spread out within multiple tables at a restaurant that is, of course, abiding by those federal regulations in reduction of their mask capacity. And then lastly is enhanced sanitation. So we are making sure that anything that is a high touch surface is sanitized frequently, and same goes for sort of any aspect of this trip. So high touch surfaces in vehicles, trains, or any equipment that you might be handling, like for example, kayak paddles. So those are the main components of the combination intervention approach. But over the past few months, we have had sort of extraordinary movement in the direction of vaccines and testing. And we have a tremendous amount of questions that come in from our guests about testing requirements and vaccine requirements. So first and foremost, I do want to say that we are in a very fluid environment right now. And a trip that is departing tomorrow is likely going to look a little bit different protocol-wise than a trip that is leaving in June, July, or August when these trips are departing. So please keep that in mind. And if we have any changes to our protocol or changes in guest expectations, we will be sure to update all of our travelers. So at this point, Natural Habitat is not requiring guests to be vaccinated. It is at this point not available to every single one of our travelers. So it's a decision that we've made at this point. But we are requiring our guests to test prior to joining the adventure. And what that does is that gives us an extra layer of information about whether our guests are carriers of COVID-19, but it also allows us that additional level of certainty and protection to the communities that we're working with. Essentially, to give you guys more information on that, we'll be following up with additional communication from your adventure specialists. And I will note again that at this point in time, if you are vaccinated, you would still need to get a negative test. And that is because of the current CDC recommendations that you could still transmit COVID if you are vaccinated. Again, I do want to note that we are in an incredibly fluid time right now. So if there are any changes to our protocol, we will be sure to reach out to you with those adjustments.
Thanks, Renata. I appreciate you staying up to date with all that. I know you're constantly scouring the internet for more information as it comes available. So we appreciate your commitment to all that. And feel free from here on out, Renata, if you have anything you want to add in relation to COVID, just step right in. But otherwise, Justin, I'm going to turn to you and let's talk about Ultimate Alaska.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
In preparation for this, I asked Justin what it is he loves about the trip and the area so much, and he gave me kind of a funny response. Do you recall what that was?
You know, I always mention this to clients to guests when we first meet. It's basically the surf and turf of Alaska, and if you look at the slide that I made a long time ago, you can see that it's obviously a very large state. It's much bigger than Texas. Sorry, any Texans in the audience today. And we travel over 2,000 miles. And so while we won't get into the Arctic, we will get into a bunch of other ecosystems, boreal forests, of course, being a big one, temperate rainforest and Western maritime. And so we get the ability to see a lot of different ecosystems and, of course, a lot of different wildlife and, you know, hopefully the biggest mountain in North America as well. So it's a special trip that I'm really looking forward to getting back on.
And it's just so dang pretty.
Yeah, it is, and this is a view from one of our lodges that we'll get into a little bit more, but just the ability to get out anywhere in the lower 48, the furthest you can be from a connecting road is 18 miles. In Alaska, just on this trip alone, we will be over 300 miles away from a connecting road at some point. So the ability to really get out there in nature the way we really can't in a lot of places is a special thing, I think.
And Justin, you've been trying to get me to come out here for years now, and I never have. And I like to do these webinars kind of through that lens that I've never visited the places that I'm talking about. And in this particular instance, I have not. So let's just kind of pretend that I'm going to be coming on a trip, an Ultimate Alaska trip this summer, and I just have a lot of questions. Hopefully, we can answer some of the same questions that we're getting from those of you that are listening. That's the goal of this. So first and foremost, what do I pack? What do I put in my bag? Should I be prepared for sun or rain? Walk me through what my bag looks like.
That's a good question. I think Alaska is an extreme place for many different reasons. The mosquitoes are a little bigger. The bears, of course, are bigger, and the weather can be variable. So when we're in Denali, for instance, potentially a little snow, but more than likely not, but it can be a little chilly. So at least in the upper 40s in Fahrenheit. And then by the time we get to the Kenai Fjords National Park, it could be rainy. And so I think that as these ladies are doing here, is dress in layers, I think is always the most important thing. You definitely want rain gear. A beanie is a good thing to have, definitely a fleece. And so you can layer up. Throughout the day, it could be very cold in the morning and then heat up into the mid 70s. And so the ability to take on and off layers is always a good thing. Yeah. And of course, it's just always nice to have a day pack so you can put that rain jacket on or off and then put it right back in your day pack. Binoculars, of course, are a good thing as well. And cameras, of course, are important as well.
Well, we'll get into the hard gear stuff a little bit further in this webinar. We'll talk about binoculars and cameras and that sort of thing. What about footwear though? I know that we often get questions about, should I bring my flip-flops? Should I bring my boots, my shoes? What do I wear on my feet?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, we're going to be hiking on or walking on trails, very similar to this. Something comfortable and maybe some ankle support and some waterproof ability just in case it rains. That is very important, I think. And then maybe just some comfortable slippers or something to wear while you're indoors is also a good thing to have as well.
And I know we had a specific question on the size of your luggage. That information can certainly be found in your pre-departure booklet. But can you walk us through how the luggage gets transferred and maybe try to sell everybody on how they should pack?
It's tricky because while I mentioned that you want all of these layers, there are 3 times we go to 3 national parks, and in all 3 of these national parks, we have to pare down to a much smaller bag, like a duffel bag. And then all of our other luggage would be stored waiting for us when we get out of that national park. And so you definitely just need the essentials for those 3 national parks. Of course, rain gear and things like that, fleece and toiletries. And that's essentially all you're bringing beyond camera gear or, medicine and things like that. So 3 times we have to pare down quite a bit.
And so when I take my luggage out of my bag to pare it down to something smaller, are those bags that you provide, or should I be prepared to bring my own separate luggage bag? How does that work?
Yeah, you'd want to bring your own duffel bag of some sort, something probably not a rolly bag, something just soft shelled, because we're going to be putting it on and off buses, float planes, things like that. And so you can go to your local store, your REI or Walmart, and just get something small.
Yeah, I believe you can even order one on the NatHab site as well.
That's right. Yeah. My duffel bags are, of course, NatHab, as they graciously have provided.
So I'm all packed. I'm ready to go. Oh yeah, that's fine. Packed and ready to go. I've just landed at the airport. What should I expect to find when I hop off the plane at the airport here in Fairbanks?
Well, if you're flying in the day of the welcome dinner, you'll be met by a natural habitat, your natural habitat guide. It's a very small airport. We'll be holding a sign with your name on it and the NatHab logo. And then it's a 10-minute drive to the hotel. It's very comfortable hotel where we'll be having a welcome dinner and sort of gearing up to talk about what to pack the next day and what to expect, etc. And so you'll be going right from the airport to a van to the hotel. There's no reason to have your rain gear ready. The very next morning, we will be, as we often do throughout this trip, we will be using what we literally refer to as the magic bus. Very comfortable, and even before COVID, it was fairly easy to spread out. And so this will be our main transportation when we're outside of the national parks.
And as with any NatHab trip, everybody is guaranteed a window seat in these sorts of transportation. So
that's right.
But not the only big difference is going to be that you'll have your masks on while inside the vehicles. This trip is pretty logistically intensive. There's a lot of moving pieces, moving parts, planes, trains, automobiles. I think I saw a boat in here. So let's just talk about the to's and fro's a little bit and talk about the transportation we'll be using along the way.
Yeah, it really is planes, trains, and automobiles, quite literally. From Fairbanks to Denali, again, the magic bus, and then we'll take a Denali bus through a dirt road, because I think the special thing with Denali is that you can't take your car into the national park past 13 miles, and we're going 92 miles into the park. And so what you won't see is a traffic jam. For instance, if you end up seeing a bear or a caribou near the roads itself, we can stop along the way. And of course, with wildlife sightings, the bus does turn off, so there's no vibration. If you want to go back to that first slide, Corbin, I'll talk about some of the other transportation. So once we get out of Denali, we will be taking a train, the famous Alaska Railroad, from Denali to Talkeetna, which again provides potential wildlife sightings and Denali as well. We will also be rafting. No whitewater, you don't have to worry about that. It's just more of a float on a glacial fed lake and river. We will also charter our own boat to potentially see marine mammals and hopefully, nice job, Corbin, you're right on it. Hopefully see some marine mammals and a glacier, a tidewater glacier as well. We'll also be taking a float plane at some point in the trip near the end. To go to the bears at Brooks Falls. And so kind of, and it's Alaska, again, this is a necessity to do this. It is nice to mix it up, but because a lot of the state has no roads, we do end up having to take these extreme transportation measures to get there. This is a common thing when you guys get to Brooks Falls. This shot can be had pretty easily. So it's a special, very unique place. Nothing like it in the entire world.
And as with, if any of you have traveled with NatHab before, you know that we're there every step of the way. So if you have any concerns about mobility or your ability to get in and out of said vehicles, we've got you. Somebody will be there at all times with a helping hand, and we'll make sure you're comfortable and safe throughout that whole process. So I know how we're getting around, but where are we getting around to? Where are we staying? You've talked about leaving bags at the hotels and this and that. So what does that look like? What's the lodging situation like on the Ultimate Alaska trip?
Yeah, the lodging is it's spectacular given where we're at. So we're going to be in some pretty remote places, and I think pretty much on every NatHab trip we try to stay at the best accommodations possible, given the fact that we do go to some pretty remote places, and so it's just, you know, it's a lot of places are going to be comfortable and warm. But rustic, and of course there will be a couple of times in which we can spoil ourselves. I think this is a good example. Every room has the potential to see Denali, and of course this is another one. This is our Alieska Resort. It's a ski resort in the winter and just a really beautiful spot in the temperate rainforest in the summer. And so, you know, the ability to just walk around the grounds and potentially see moose or black bear is certainly a pretty amazing and unique thing. And I think this is probably my favorite accommodation of the entire trip. We literally have an island to ourselves, and, you know, maybe a couple other guests, but just the nature of this lodge, there's only a certain number of cabins, and so oftentimes, you know, you'll find yourself just surrounded by quiet, and potentially, you know, see a whale from your cabin window, or a sea otter, and it's just a really special place. And again, this is one of those things where we have found the best accommodation in the area.
Yeah, sometimes means that it can be a little more rustic than, say, the lodge at Alieska.
For sure. And so, you know, kind of the nature of getting to these bears, now we are going to be the furthest out we will be on this trip, in and around Katmai National Park. And so the trips are divided into potentially 2 different accommodations, this being Gold Creek, which is in King Salmon. What that allows is it's a very comfortable and beautiful spot, potential to see bears right there on the grounds, and then we fly in every day to see those bears at Brooks Falls. And so I think that's a pretty nice option. It allows you a little more floatplane time and some you know, some comfortable accommodations. Now, of course, some of you will be staying at Brooks Falls itself, and this is the most rustic, I think, our accommodations will get. But of course, the benefit there is that you are at Brooks Falls, you know, or Brooks Lake rather, for the duration of your Katmai stay. And so both have really good benefits. And I actually like to lead both. They're both very different, but, you know, in the end, it's about seeing those bears at Brooks Falls, and of course, that ability will happen on both of those options.
And for anybody that stayed in national park lodging before, it's pretty standard across the board anywhere you go in the States. And so I've just included a couple of photos here just to show you that these are your basic hotel rooms, rustic and charming, a little quirky, but they're comfortable and they're warm, and you can plug your iPhones in and you can recharge your batteries for night, and it'll be all good.
Yeah, I wanted to mention one more thing. Every single accommodation has the ability to charge things. At Fox Island, you know, some of the rooms have outlets right in the room, especially if you need a CPAP machine. But every other place has outlets in the rooms proper. And for the rest of the folks that might not have a CPAP machine, you can always charge your things at Fox Island right in the main lodge, which is just a small walk away from your cabin. So there's always an ability to charge phones and camera batteries.
Perfect. So we won't spend too much time on food, but I know that the options are all there. I know you're a foodie, Justin, so tell us a little bit about the food on the trip.
Yeah, the food is fantastic. Number one, you know, dietary restrictions we follow very seriously, and I'm sure that if you've given your dietary needs to the NatHab office, and if you haven't, please do so we can take care of that ahead of time. But the food is fantastic. There's always going to be fresh, never frozen salmon on the menu, halibut on occasion, king crab options, I think once or twice. And then of course, if you're not a seafood person, there's always going to be burgers and vegetarian options as well. But the food on this trip is remarkable.
And you'd be hard pressed to find a spot where you're not eating in a beautiful location as well. This is just one instance of that, but pretty much everywhere you look, you're going to be dining in a beautiful location. Everywhere
you go, you're going to see mountains with glaciers and potential for wildlife right out your window. And yeah, you're getting me very excited. I want this. I want it to be June right now. So I'm packed. I'm ready. I know what's in my bag. I'm familiar with all that. I know what kind of transportation I'm going to be using, where I'm staying, where I'm eating. What am I going to be doing? What's the trip? Well, it's the surf and turf of Alaska, Corbin. We're going to see a little bit of everything. We're going to start sort of in the boreal forest and the alpine tundra. And so without a salmon source, wildlife is a little more scattered and spread out, but luckily we'll be driving 92 miles inside the park. And so when we first start, it's going to be mainly to hopefully get a glimpse of that elusive Denali mountain. And this will be our only opportunity to see caribou on the trip. Once we go further south, they're rare or non-existent in some of those spots. And so those two things are really important. And we will be getting out, doing some hiking, just taking our time, stopping and smelling the flowers. It's nice because it's a long 12-day trip. And so that allows us to slow down and not rush through things, which is really important, I think. And you've mentioned hiking and being on trail a couple of times now. We're not climbing a mountain. We're on something that's a little more graded to ability levels, or what's the trails? What do the trails look like? Yeah, I think on our scheduled walks, this is about as uneven of a terrain that you'll find. For those that like activity, a strenuous activity, that is always an option almost every single day. Your guide will give you options to do something a little more strenuous. But this is about as uneven as it gets for our scheduled group activities. In Denali, you typically have 3 different options, sort of an easy casual, a moderate, and then a strenuous, and they're all guided. But throughout the trip, this is about as uneven as it gets. And, a lot of times you're on these boardwalks just like this, very flat ground. And again, this is not a hike just to hike. This is a hike to talk about, for instance, the temperate rainforest and the ecosystem and all of its intricacies, and of course, looking for birds and stopping to take pictures of fireweed and things like that. And so it's a nice casual pace. Yeah, and this would be one of those moments where your day pack really comes in handy with your layers. As you've seen through some of these photos, we've had pictures of people in t-shirts. We've also got pictures of people in puffy jackets with raincoats over them. So it's pretty variable, it seems. Yeah, I think throughout the day, even on a sunny, clear day, you start with a fleece for sure. And then by the end of the day, you might be down to a t-shirt. And so those day packs are very important for sure. So you can layer on and off as you go. And I was going to bring it up a little further down the presentation here, but you mentioned stopping to take photos. So I think we might as well use this opportunity just to talk about camera gear a little bit. Do I need to bring my 14 millimeter or my 400? What's in my camera bag? Yeah, I think what's in your camera bag is a wide angle can be a very good thing, especially for big landscapes. Open space is a thing that's widely available in Alaska, big mountains. But then also, we're going to see some wildlife that might be a little far off. And so I always like to think of maybe a 70 to 300 zoom is good. You don't want to bring the 600 millimeter necessarily. It's big and clunky. It takes a lot of weight, and I think it might get in your way a lot. And so something compact, a 70 to 300 is always a good thing to do. And of course, you know, where you would use that 600 millimeter would be either in Kenai Fjords or at Brooks. In Kenai Fjords, you're going to be on a boat, so you can't really use a 600 millimeter with a tripod. And then when we're at the falls themselves, tripods are not allowed, just because they take up too much space for those viewing platforms. And so 70 to 300, something you can handhold, is what I recommend. So nothing too extreme, but just a nice mixture of wide angle and then a fairly wide ranging zoom is a good thing to have.
Fair enough. You mentioned the Kenai and being on the boats, and you mentioned earlier about the raft trip. You want to walk us through the rafting day, and then we can get to the Tanya's boat after?
The rafting day is what I like to call a sleeper, because, you know, there's all these big things that we're talking about, potential whales, and of course Brooks Falls and Denali National Park and the mountain itself. This day is just kind of snuck in there, and people don't see it coming, but it's a spectacular trip. First off, we are taking a train that is a flag stop. So we are actually going to get on the train for maybe 30, 40 minutes. And then once we get off with our guides, we'll be in this remote location with a beautiful glacier called Spencer Glacier, and potential to just go right up to these icebergs safely, of course, with these guides. And what's really nice about this operation that we are, you know, partnered with, is that they actually provide muck boots. So you don't have to worry about bringing waterproof boots. This is the only time we would ever need that, and so they provide it for you. And yeah, it's a nice cruise on a river around these icebergs, and then we slowly meander, looking for wildlife along the way and talking about glacier succession as it relates to different, just the landscape in general, and trees, etc. So it's a really special day, and it could be a little cold on that lake if the wind is blowing off the glacier. Again, that's why you want those layers, and it, you know, you never know. It could be raining, it could be sunny. So again, always pack those day packs for a little bit of everything.
And I think it's important to note here as well that we haven't run these trips during the pandemic, so this scene is likely to look a little bit different on your trip, especially in the way of having a mask on. So just a heads up there, just to be thorough.
Sure.
And then this is the boat ride. I believe you're looking at some rare bird, you said.
Yeah, I think it's a red-faced cormorant, which, if you're a birder, that's a pretty big check on the list. So we'll spend an entire day. You know, usually in Kenai Fjords, when you go, you're on a boat with quite a few people for the day. That doesn't allow you, for instance, to get into this cove. It's too small for those bigger boats. We have an exclusive boat. It's just going to be us. And so if everyone is into birds, we can do a little birding. We went specifically to this cove to see a red-faced cormorant because we had somebody that it was a life bird that he really wanted to get. But we also have the opportunity to turn off the engines, and if we are around humpbacks or orcas, to put a hydrophone in the water and listen. It provides us a lot more flexibility and definitely a more intimate experience than a lot of folks get to have in Kenai Fjords National Park. It's a very special day.
And then finally, I think this is the last of the water-based activities before we get into wildlife, which I think is what everybody is hoping to hear about here. So just really briefly here, just describe the kayaking to me.
Yeah, this is sea-based kayaking, and that's about as rough of water as you'll find. We do our kayaking from Fox Island, and it's protected water, and so you'll be with kayak guides, and it's just an afternoon. It's after lunch, and you go out and you just see what you can find. Maybe some puffins or sea otters are a common thing. Now, by the way, if you're not into sea kayaking, I know that some of my guests in the past have been a little unsure. Another option for this day, for this afternoon, it's about 2.5 hours on kayaks, is to just walk the beach all by yourself. You'll essentially, well, and there'll be a park ranger there as well, but you essentially have an island nearly to yourself except for staff. And so that's an option as well if you're not too keen on kayaking.
All right, so we've got about 5 minutes left here, but I just wanted to run through the trip kind of chronologically, just to kind of cover some species that you might run into along the way. So we'll just spend a moment or two on each of these photos, and then we'll open the floor for questions.
Yeah, caribou. This is a remarkable animal that we can only find in Denali on our trip, and so we'll search for seeing some caribou. Moose. This is the largest deer in the world, actually, and this is a subspecies, Alcis alcis gigantus, if you can believe it, only found in Alaska and the Yukon. And so when we see this, hopefully we'll all see this. This is the biggest deer in the world. And of course, bears, both black bears a possibility, and of course, brown bears / grizzlies, same species. And hopefully we'll have a few opportunities before Brooks even to see some grizzlies. And of course, salmon, which is the heart and soul of most of this trip. Everything starts and ends with salmon and its effect on the ecosystem, and the potential to see one of five or more of the 5 species of salmon. So that's a very special important part of the trip. And lots of amazing bird life. Bald eagles are everywhere, especially on the second 2 of the 3 national parks, Kenai Fjords and Katmai, as they're a salmon, a fish-eating bird. Yeah, lots of potential for amazing big animals. This is a humpback whale. So humpback whales, orcas, potentially even gray whales in Kenai Fjords National Park. Sea otters, which are a keystone species that your guide will be talking about, almost extinct at one point, and now they're making a comeback. And so these cute little guys are not shy. We'll stop and take some pictures remarkably similar to this.
Love these guys.
Yeah, and of course, the cutest maybe of all the animals, all the animals we'll see, which are the puffins. Pretty special, beautiful birds. I like to call them flying footballs because they're very awkward and heavy.
So let's I just want to kind of set some expectations specifically around Brooks Falls in this portion of the trip and what that looks like when you're viewing the bears in this location. I think we're all familiar with, at least via the internet to this point.
Yeah, Brooks is of course known to be one of the best bear viewing places in the world. You can do so safely. Most of the time you're on platforms. The falls itself can be crowded, especially in the middle of the day. And it can be so crowded that they only allow 40 people on the platform at once. And so there is potential. It doesn't happen often. Might happen to each of you once, I guess, on the trip, that you will have to sign up for a waiting list to get on that platform. And the wait can be up to 2 hours. And you get an hour on that platform. The beautiful thing about going day after day is that you can avoid the crowds, and your guides have done this enough to know when it's going to be crowded and when it's not going to be crowded. And so when it's crowded, there's plenty of other opportunities and places to view bears beyond the falls, and then we can also do the falls, for instance, while everyone's at lunch or dinner, depending on where you're staying. That allows the opportunities to have it nearly all to ourselves. But like I said, in the meantime, when this crowd is going on, there's opportunity to watch bears elsewhere and different behaviors, which is also special and important.
And the payout for your patients is, the proof is in the photos here. So this is the type of thing that we're hoping to see.
Yeah, the payoff is very obvious. You might have to deal with a pushy photographer here or there, or just a big family that's moving around and excited, but this is why we're there. And so that's an important thing to remember. These bears are, it's one of the better wildlife viewing potentials in the entire world. There's not many that get better than this.
Well, I think that that's all the questions I have for you, Justin. Is there anything you feel you needed to add that we didn't cover before we open the floor for questions?
No, I'm just excited to meet some of you, and thank you for joining in. And it's exciting to be able to start, guiding and meeting guests again and sharing my passion for these animals and places.
And Renata, anything to add here at the end?
Just that I love this itinerary. I've been lucky enough actually to travel with Justin on this itinerary. I don't remember how many years ago, but just every single component of it is so different and just so incredible. You're looking at a puffin one second and then a whale in next, and then you're bears, and then you're on kayaks. I love this itinerary. So I'm very excited for you all that are joining on this webinar to be able to experience it, because it is once in a lifetime for sure.
It's a good one for sure.
Great. Well, thanks guys. Kendall, if you're ready, I would imagine you've got some questions for us.
Yeah, we've got a lot of good questions for you, and I just want to remind everyone who's watching, if you have a question for our panel today, you can submit those in your control panel under the questions field. And just note that we will try to cut it off at the top of the hour today. So if we don't get to your question, your adventure specialist is always happy to help you out. Okay, Renata, I'm going to start off with some COVID-related questions for you. Do we have to wear masks if we've been vaccinated?
So the answer to that question is yes, because there's not enough scientific data that doesn't show that if you have been vaccinated that you still could transmit COVID. So it is the directive of the CDC that you still abide by the same protocols as those who have not been vaccinated. I also still want to say again that we're in a, even more so than we were a month ago, an incredibly fluid environment with the directives from the CDC and the number of individuals that are being vaccinated. I think we're now last week we were at 2.1 million people being vaccinated on a daily basis, and this week it's 2.4. So we're making tremendous progress, but what that means is there is going to be changes as more and more information becomes available to us. But yes, if you are vaccinated on this trip at this point, yes, you would need to wear a mask.
Okay, great. And someone was wondering how we're planning on social distancing in the planes, vans, and boats.
So within, we do allow for additional space. The Magic Bus, for example, seats 28, 30, and we only put 14 individuals in there. But again, because of the combination intervention approach, if you're not able to physically distance, then wearing a mask within and just inside in vehicles, you'd be wearing a mask during that point.
And speaking of masks, someone was wondering if they're required to wear the KN95s or if they can wear their own cloth masks.
You can wear your own cloth mask. We just provide, we do provide KN95 masks, so you can utilize that if you are flying, if you'd like an additional mask to wear.
Okay. So there's a couple questions here about testing, so I'm going to combine those for you. Can you arrange a COVID test in Anchorage for international visitors? And looks like someone is going to be in Fairbanks 3 days prior to the start of the trip. So they're just wondering how they can get a COVID test and if we can help arrange that.
Yeah, of course. So I would suggest if you're, there's multiple actually mail-in testing that you can do if you're within the US. LabCorp, for example, has a Pixel test that you can just pop in, take the test and pop in a FedEx Dropbox, and that has pretty quick results. If you are international, I would suggest that you touch base with your adventure specialist a bit closer to the start of the trip, because likely there might be some changes in the duration of when you need doing that. So again, there are, for those that might be traveling beforehand, a LabCorp test is about this big. So you can, or the box that contains it is about that big, and it's pretty easy to mail in. I've taken a few of those tests personally before I've done some traveling myself.
Okay, great. And should people bring their vaccination cards if they've been vaccinated?
That is a good question that I haven't gotten yet. I would say that if you're traveling, it would probably be a good thing to bring. But again, as we get closer to the departure date, we will be sure to update you with the exact information that you would need to bring. So that information you can expect in your pre-departure briefing from NatHab, or as in a specific email update.
Okay, great. Okay, a lot of folks are wondering if laundry service is available at any of the hotels along the way.
Yes, yeah. So your very first stop in Fairbanks has laundry. After basically anytime we're out of a national park, so in Fairbanks and Talkeetna, at Alieska, and in Anchorage, there's going to be laundry services. Inside the national park, no, none of the 3 spots will have laundry available.
Okay. And if someone has dietary constraints, is this able to be accommodated?
It is, yeah. As long as it's on the roster ahead of time, we are fully capable of dietary constraints, you know, shellfish allergy or gluten-free or anything like that. We're able to accommodate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so people should just make sure to let your adventure specialist know if you have any dietary restrictions ahead of time. All right, a lot of confusion here, it seems, about luggage and luggage size and luggage weight. So is there any way you guys can like really break it down for us in terms of, you know, the regular larger luggage you can bring, sizes, you know, size restrictions, weight restrictions, and then especially when we want to break it down to the smaller bags?
It is. It's kind of a confusing thing. So let's just say anything that you can bring on an airplane, a regular airplane, you know, 50 pounds or less, you can bring on the trip proper. There are 3 times, all 3 national parks, you do have to pare that down to a duffel bag, essentially. Size-wise, you know, I would say, I'm not sure what those duffels are, cubic inches or anything like that, but essentially it's just enough for a few layers, a change of clothes, and toiletries. And that is something that people are not usually you know, comfortable with until they do it through Denali, and then they realize that it's fine because it's only 2 days, 3 days at a time, and then we're back to our main luggage, where of course you can change out whatever you need to change out. And the reasoning for this is in all 3 national parks, you know, to get there, we're on transportation that is limited. Denali, we go into on a bus where they only allow a certain amount of luggage because it's a, you know, a bus with other people. We're on a boat to Kenai Fjords that is limited in size, and then of course a float plane to Brooks. And so all 3 of those, you really just need to pare it down to the essentials and what you need. I know that's uncomfortable for a lot of folks, especially until the first time, but it's something that it kind of is what it is. All 3 places request that and won't kind of are sticklers on it.
Okay. And at Brooks Falls, can people bring a monopod?
The monopod is great. Yeah, that's a great question. A monopod is just fine. It's mainly the tripod because it takes up 3 people's spot. And you can actually use a tripod anywhere at Brooks except for the Brooks Falls. And so if you really wanted to bring a small tripod that you can collapse down or something, you can. But it's mainly just that Falls platform that you can't use one.
All right. And do people need trekking poles for when you're hiking?
If you're comfortable with trekking poles, more comfortable with trekking poles, then absolutely. Go ahead. Again, we are rarely on uneven terrain, and so I don't think it's necessary unless you're just really used to them, or it provides you a little more comfort. You can certainly bring some. We don't carry them on this trip just because of the nature of the terrain in which we walk and hike. And so if you do want to bring them, go ahead. You're definitely allowed to do so.
And when you're hiking, is it okay to bring a camera bag with different lenses?
Yeah, absolutely. A camera bag, as long as there's room for rain gear, because you don't want to sacrifice that rain gear for that extra lens. But if you can do both, absolutely. I always have my camera and a few lenses on my back as well.
Mm-hmm. And for those who've been to Brooks Falls before, is it necessary to take the bear class again?
Yes, every year, including me. I was a ranger there for a couple of years early in my career, and I still have to take the class. So you can't get out of that. I've tried.
Someone's wondering if they should bring a water bottle with them.
Renata, do you know, are we?
Yeah, we provide water bottles on the first day of your trip. So we will have that for you, for your use and for you to keep as a souvenir.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because we really tried our hardest to minimize our waste, our plastic waste in particular. And so we will have an opportunity to refill those water bottles throughout the day in many places.
Mm-hmm. Do you recommend bringing dry bags with you?
Your dry bag could be your duffel bag, so that's fine. It will never be in a situation where we're going to need to keep our luggage dry. It's always going to be safe and dry. Your backpack, if it had some waterproof ability, could be a good thing, just in case we get rained on. But it's not necessary for your luggage.
Okay. And how are the mosquitoes? Is it going to be necessary to bring bug spray or nets for your head?
That's a good question. All of your guides will have DEET and non-DEET options as far as bug spray, and also sunscreen, non-harmful sunscreen. If you want something else beyond that, or if you have a particular brand that you're fond of, please bring your own, but we will have those options. As far as mosquitoes, it changes year to year. It depends on the snow level with mosquitoes and how much insulation their eggs have. This year, there's been enough snow where it could be bad, and that's usually the worst is in Denali National Park. And then as we get to the coast, there's usually a breeze that keeps everything away. But that is a reality of the trip in Alaska in general, is that mosquitoes can be something. And all of your guides will provide head nets for you as well, just in case you want to go that route.
All right, great. And it's the top of the hour, so one more question, and then I'm going to call it for the day. Is internet available throughout the trip?
Not everywhere. It's available, again, outside of the national parks everywhere. And inside the national parks, nowhere. So the same places that you had laundry service, Fairbanks, Talkeetna, Alieska, and Anchorage, you will have internet, but inside the national parks, you will not.
All right, great. Well, for everyone watching, I do apologize if I didn't get to your question today. Please definitely reference your pre-departure briefing, or you can give us a call and speak to your adventure specialist if you need some further answers. Okay, gang, Corbin, Justin, Renata, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. You covered so much. It was very thorough, so great job. Corbin, I'm going to hand it back to you for closing comments.
Yeah, thanks again, as always, for putting this on and making this available to us. And Justin and Renata, thank you guys for joining as well. And for all those listening, I'm excited for you. I'm happy that you have the opportunity to get out there. And I think we're all just excited to get back outside a little bit. So thank you to everyone involved.
Yeah, thank you so much again, everyone. And my thanks as well to everyone who tuned in. Do remember to give us a call and speak to your adventure specialist if you have further questions. We did record today, so we will have the replay emailed out to you soon. And with that, I'll conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.